Family, glad to be back with you for another week. Hope you have been having a great one. If you're new here, I am Anthony, better known as Soul Swami on this channel. We generally do shows on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesday shows are generally always about healing and some sort of connection to healing or live interviews where people get their energy read on live for free. And Thursday night is a book club. Hold on. Am I quiet? Okay, cool. I hear me. I hear. Okay, it's this. Forgive me. I got to monitor the show while I do that. And Thursdays are generally book club, which kind of is an extension of our Tuesday show. It came from the idea of allowing us to connect to the inner child in us, and most kids like being read to, so that's where this comes from. And we offer suggestions on what book we'll read, so you have the opportunity to do that as we get close to completing this book. We start every show, whether it's Tuesday or Thursday, with a sound therapy, and we always are conscious of the lights, so the lights generally match the chakra that we're in, so we try to put a little light therapy to it, and we do some breathing exercise and a visualization. And we are currently reading Makes Me Wanna Holler by Nathan McCall. I got the rain stick out tonight too, so we're gonna do a little rain stick with that. But glad to have you here, family. We did dragon breaths too. I don't think I want to do dragon breaths again, but 478 sounds good. That'll be the breathing exercise that we do. And don't worry, if you're not familiar with 478, I will guide you through it as well through the visualization. It's a way, and the affirmations, a way for us to be able to practice our meditation or grow in our meditation. I'm smiling because I do have some new sage that I'm really excited about, and I thought about sharing it with y'all. Well, forget it. If I thought about it, gotta trust my spirit. So give me a second. I have a new one that is an orange. It is an orange and citrus. I really like it. Excuse me. Orange and cinnamon. That is the cinnamon stick that you see on the side. Just white sage. Then I have this one here, which is Midnight Bloom. No, scratch. It is Blue Moon. I'm excited to use that. And then I also have this one is Midnight Bloom. Haven't burned them yet, but I can't wait. Um, oh God, I think I'm gonna do some Reiki work tomorrow, so I'll probably have the opportunity to use those, and I can't wait. Or if not, I'll use them on myself sometime this weekend. All right, family, let's start with the bowl. Thanks for joining. I see you on TikTok. Appreciate you on Instagram, Facebook family. You know it. Twitch, I value you as well. Yeah, we're a little bit of everywhere, so you got options on how you want to watch us. Let me see. I knew it. All right. All right, family. Next, we will do our breathing exercise. Next, we'll do our breathing exercise. We're going to do the 478. We'll do that 3 times. That is, you breathe in for a 4 count. You hold your breath for a 7 count. And you release for an 8 count. You breathe out for an 8 count. So during this time, you just focus on your breathing, be mindful of your thoughts, and just allow me to guide you through this process. On the count of 3, you're going to breathe in for a 4 count. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Breathe in. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Last time, family. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Boswell, I see you, boy. You must be bored. Or you just happen to be scrolling. Y'all don't know. I gotta give my man a shout out, man. He like my brother from another mother, so you can tell. I appreciate you, bro. Man, do some of them breathing exercises. I'll let your boy read to you. Boy, what is this, Thursday? I'm surprised you ain't outside. You must have did something yesterday, man. That's good. I'm glad you stopped by for a second. Always, Boz. I appreciate you. So we are on our crown chakra. The color for that is violet, but I'm gonna say purple because I like to keep things simple. Hence the purple light. The element for that is thought. So our visualization is gonna be mindful of our thoughts, and the crown chakra resides right above your head, and it's pretty much for your consciousness, your spiritual connection, and your sacred knowledge. So with that, close your eyes and be mindful of your breathing. Pay attention to your breaths in, pay attention to your breaths out. And while you are paying attention to your breaths in and paying attention to your breaths out, I want you to begin to gather those thoughts that are contrary to who you authentically are. I want you to start thinking about all those thoughts that tell you you can't do. Those thoughts you tell yourself to keep you from pursuing your own dreams and living out your purpose. Those thoughts of, I don't deserve this. Or those thoughts of, I can't do that. Or those thoughts of, it's going to require too much time. Even those thoughts of, it's too late for me to try that. I want you to really, really, really gather them all together in one big bundle. And when you got those thoughts together, I want you to consciously take those thoughts and begin to pull them apart and replace those contrary words with positive words to remind you of who you truly are. So I want you to turn that I can't into I can. I want you to turn that I don't deserve to I do deserve. I want you to turn those feelings of, those thoughts of, I'm not worthy to, it is my God given birthright. And as you are taking time and replacing those words with words in alignment with who you are, I want you to repeat these affirmations with me. I don't know if that's working. Hold on. Hey, sorry. I am divine. I am connected to the universe. I am at peace. I am a spiritual being. I release doubt and welcome faith. divine. I am connected to the universe. I am at peace. I am a spiritual being. I release doubt and welcome faith. All right, family. You can use those affirmations at any time. They'll be very good for you as you're trying to get your crown in order. Uh-oh. Hold on. What's going on? Somebody talking to me? Oh, no, that's me. It's funny when those comments show up. We're about to get back to this book. He still, I don't even know what year he is in jail, but his girlfriend and baby mama finally broke up with him. She's dating someone else. Oh, I know what they had in the book. They had the book where how they deal with sexuality in prison. And I think he was talking about the first time he saw a man get flipped. It was crazy. Yep, that was the last word it says. Like they flipped him like a pancake. So, all right, family, here we go. I could always tell when the tensions was high. There'd be less joking going on, and allies hung closer together on the yard. The most telling sign this was time was the posturing of dudes in the Tidewater and Richmond gangs. Members of each of the gangs stuck tighter than usual on the yard, eyeing each other hard. I found out that there were rumors of a war. Normally, it took a lot to bring those two gangs to blows. They talked trash to each other, especially when playing football or shooting hoops. But mutual respect underlay it all. Yet, it was understood that if a rumble jumped off, both sides were ready to throw down. I went to Pearly Blue and asked him what was up. Excuse me. You ain't heard, man? They competing for this new broad that just came out of receiving unit. Her name is Pauline. They waiting to see who she gonna choose. Who she gonna choose? I echoed, confused. Yeah, she just came to the yard and she ain't chose nobody yet. So the brothers are getting kind of uptight because she looks good. She looked just like a bitch. The Richmond and Tidewater gangs each had their best rappers vying for Pauline's attention, and all kinds of candy and cigarettes and other gifts were being sent to her. That was another one of those penitentiary mating rituals that had been around so long that old heads acted like it was the most natural thing in the world. All the chatter made me curious. There were a lot of closeted and openly gay guys at Southampton, but this was the first time I ever saw excitement generated when a new openly gay inmate came on the yard. I wanted to see for myself how the new guy looked. I only saw him once at a distance, then he disappeared. As soon as the prison administrators found out about the tensions he created on the yard, they put him in protective custody to calm things down. He stayed in lockup a long while, and the tensions eased. I'd forgotten all about it till one day when, as a part of our Christian fellowship activities, I was visiting the lockup cells. The administration let us go to lockup on the weekends to witness, talk to the inmates, and try to get them interested in God and the Bible. I'd finished talking with a guy at one cell and moved to the next, and there he was, standing at the bars, looking straight at me. I jumped back, surprised. Pauline looked just like a woman. He was about 5'8" and very slender, tan complexion and clean shaven. He had long eyelashes and seemed to have plucked and arched his eyebrows like women do. His hair was long and straight, looked like it had been tinted a reddish blonde. He even had this gray prison shirt rigged to look like a woman's blouse. Instead of buttoning it down the front and tucking it into his pants like everybody else, he had left it unbuttoned and tied in tails into a knot, revealing part of his flat chest and trim waist. His chin provided the only clue that he was a man. If you looked hard, you could see the outline of where he shaved. I collected myself, then walked over to the cell and spoke to him. Do you believe in God? Yes, I believe in God. I was raised in the church, he said in a soft, high pitched tone. Are you saved? I accepted Jesus as my Savior a long time ago. Well, then, how'd you get like this? I hadn't intended to be so blunt. It just spilled out that way. He told me a long story about how he was molested as a child by a teenage uncle who was his babysitter. For a long time after that, he said he'd been confused about his sexuality. He even got deeply involved in the church and asked God to help him resist temptation, but gave up fighting because the homosexual impulses were too strong. Although his real name was Paul, he said he preferred to be called Pauline. I feel, he said, like I was meant to be a woman. On the streets, my homeboys and I had always called gays sissies and freaks, and we'd hassle them. But listening to Pauline's stories, I saw that he'd spent much of his life at odds with himself. I sympathized. Yet there was something about him, his feminine manner, and the way he gazed into my eyes when he spoke, that made me uneasy. Hold on. Let me go ahead and see if I can block you. Oh, okay. Hold on. Hold on, family. I gotta delete this comment. Give me a pause. Doo-doo-doo. And there we go. All right. Now back to the party. Thanks for your patience. Some weirdo found me on TikTok, so and was begging for money. All right. I enjoyed talking with him, but I felt the need to get away, so I did. I bowed my head, recited a short prayer for him, then said goodbye and moved on to another cell. Pauline was eventually released back into the prison population. Whenever I saw him on the yard, I spoke to him briefly and kept walking. He made me self conscious and awkward, and I felt even more uneasy about the prospect of being seen by the guards or inmates talking with someone who was gay. Ultimately, Pauline chose as his man a smooth talking gold tooth player who was quarterback for the Richmond Gangs football team. They walked around the yard together like a couple on the street. The prison vets and wolves looked on jealous. Guys in Richmond gang gloated she belonged to them. Miss Pinkney was one of the several teachers who helped inmates at the school work towards earning their GEDs. There was one female teacher, no, excuse me, there was one other female teacher, but compared to Miss Pinkney, she wasn't much to look at. A short, petite woman in her early 30s, Miss Pinkney was dark skinned and thin boned and had big brown eyes and full lips that glistened from the bright colored lipstick she wore. Other inmates stumbled over each other trying to open doors for her, carry her books, or do anything to command her attention for a few minutes. Every time Miss Pinkney went to the restroom, inmates rushed into the library to the men's bathroom. They punched a tiny hole in the wall, enabling them to peek down over the women's toilet next to next door. Although I wanted to go, I didn't. I believed that if I saw what other inmates said they'd seen, it might drive me over the edge. Besides, I didn't want to give in so easily to Miss Pinkney. I was certain she was a tease. She had never said anything to suggest that, but after studying her dress and manner carefully, I concluded she knowingly tortured us. She wore very high heels and fitted skirts that hugged contours of her shapely body, and she walked slowly, swaying her hips gently, beckoning me, it seemed, to grab her around her waist and pull her to me. She wore strong perfumes that inflamed my nostrils whenever she was near. I said to myself, she has to know she drives us crazy. I loved and hated her all at once. Like everybody else, I was drawn to her, but I resisted because I didn't want to join the long list of guys whose hormones she controlled. In spite of myself, I gave in sometimes in other ways. Every time she came in the library, I grew dizzy and went to war with my emotions. One day she strolled over to the card catalog where I was flipping through some titles. She asked me had we had any old issues of the Ebony magazine. I'm giving my class an assignment and I want them to research the material in those magazines. Yes, ma'am, I said, I'll check for you. While she waited in the main section, I walked into the back room and began leafing through stacks of magazines piled on the floor. When I had gathered a stack, I took them to her and said, let me know if you need some more. And as she took the magazines, my hands brushed slightly against hers. The sensation lingered and I felt dizzy. I resumed working, trying hard not to stare at her. Still, when she sat at the table and casually began turning the pages in the magazines, I watched from the corner of my eye. I drank in every detail about her, including the contrast of her bright red fingernail polish against the black and white pages as she turned, and the way her black hair fell just so, revealing the base of her neck, the neck I wanted to kiss. I fantasized about an exchange between us. In that fantasy, she confessed a secret desire for me that was stronger than my own lust for her. Every other inmate, I'm sure, imagined the same thing. For a while, she and I were the only people in the library, and I couldn't resist taking advantage of that rare moment alone with her. I thought, what if we talked and we realized we had some common interests? Maybe she likes to read the same things I do. I glanced at her sitting in the corner, reading. I had to think of a way to get her to interact with me. I returned to the storage room and tore through stacks of magazines until I found more back issues of Ebony. I stood there with the magazines in my hand, trying to figure out what to say. I carried the magazines to Miss Pinkney like a child trying to win favor with an adult. I took a deep breath. Here, I said, I found some more in case you need them. She looked up from her reading. That's all right, she said. These are enough. Then she gathered the magazines I'd given her, picked up her pocketbook, and headed for the door. I was left standing there with an armload of magazines, hating her only slightly less than I hated myself for letting me make a fool of me. All right. Before prison, I've been aware, but mm, not really conscious that there were vast psychic difference between men and women, and I never really considered what women added to the world. Then I realized that if prison was my indication, a world without women would be crazy, stark raving mad. It became clearer than ever to me that women brought a lot to the table that the world couldn't do without. They brought balance, beauty of spirit, and sanity. Lots and lots of simple sanity. I'd seen some who were as messed up in the head as any man, but all things considered, women generally knew more about being human than beings than most men I'd come across. Women brought a dimension to life that I discovered only after being placed in a fenced in universe from which they were absent. In the visiting room, I watched their mannerisms, the way they held their hands when they talked. I noticed how they dressed, and other little details such as their earrings hypnotized me. I could even pick up their perfume fragrances at a table near mine. Sometimes, while I was at the visiting room talking with my parents, I'd hone in on the fragrance or mannerisms of a woman at a table nearby, and my heart would float over there against my will. I'd fight off the urge to get up and walk over and plead, please, can I just sit here a minute and talk with you? Sometimes sexual tension got so heavy in my chest that it felt like I might just explode, blow up in a puff of smoke. I knew I had to come up with some strategies to beat that energy down. For starters, I got rid of all those Playboy pinups in my room and stopped cruising through freak magazines that would get me upset. When I realized that the sight of women on screen also got me, I damn near gave up watching TV altogether. I got so thoroughly out of the habit of watching TV that I seldom turned on my television set, even today. I also designed a regimen to help me keep myself in check. I'd rise at 5, write poetry, or make journal entries until breakfast time. Then I'd go to work, eat dinner, jog, and stagger back to my room. Later, I'd go to the basement and lift weights to work that strangling tightness out of my chest. Exhausted, I'd shower, return to my room, and read until the lights went out. I'd put on some headphones, listen to music, and stare out that porthole of a window at the stars in the night sky and think. I thought more about women than I had in my entire life. I think about all the hatred and abuse that the fellas and I had heaped on women, and I promised God that if I ever got out of prison alive, I'd never mistreat another woman as long as I lived. Laying in the darkness, I'd caress myself and let my imagination soar beyond Southampton's long country roads to places where the world was as tuned, turned up right. I'd pick up a date and we'd go out for the evening to dinner or a movie. Maybe we'd walk and talk. I'd imagine entire conversations I wanted to have with women. In my fantasy, the ending to my lovely evening was always the same. We'd go to my date's apartment, embrace, make love, and fall asleep exhausted. Then I'd wake up the next morning to haunting shrill of the prison whistle, signaling that it was time to start a new day. Chapter 22. Oh, man, okay, cool. Jim. 2 years into my prison stint, Liz had started writing me again, and we talked about the possibility of getting back together. I was also starting to have trouble with my Christian fellowship group. There were too many weirdos joining up to seek protection from the wolves, and it was becoming hard to talk with the Christians about all the things that I was learning and thinking about. My mental and spiritual regime had begun to make me feel whole for the first time in my life. It wasn't just about to give that up to start to please some jackleg wannabe preachers. Maybe that's why I started listening to a guy named Jim, who was the most respected inmate at Southampton. A Richmond native, hit in his mid 30s, Jim was on the tail end of a life sentence for murder. He'd done close to 15 years in the joint. He was admired partly because of the way he'd handled his time, but mostly because of his integrity and broad intellect. Unlike so many other dudes who became mentally passive after years in prison, Jim had somehow remained a free thinker who stayed focused on the world beyond that fence. Using his prison time to educate himself, he'd evolved into a self assured, articulate brother with an unyielding commitment to what he called black folks' struggle. Administrators were so impressed with his intelligence that they allowed him to teach inmates at the institution schools. I'd seen him around the yard a lot, but for a long time kept my distance. Jim hated the white man, and I was trying to internalize Christian love. By the summer of 77, I began to fast once weekly, spending those days mostly in my room, praying, thinking, and reading everything from poetry to philosophy to books about nutrition. I read Pearl Buck's novel and Herman Hesse and The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. You know, that's where I got my thank you, Liberty. You might not be here tonight, but I appreciate you because I got that book now. I found myself drawn to the novels of Chan Potek, including My Name is Asher Lev, a book about a young artist that gave me insight to Jewish culture. I had to read Night by Ellie Weiss. especially Picasso, what, and whetted my curiosity about art, especially Picasso. I never known art could be so powerful to make social and political statements. I experimented with a memory technique and learned how to recall up to 100 number words and names in sequential order. There were times I got so deep into reading and fasting that I felt I transcended the constraints of prison. In those moments, it seemed not to matter whether I stayed behind bars another year or an eternity. With all this going on inside me, I think that's why I became more curious about what Jim had to say. Some evenings he held some evenings he held court on the yard, and guys gathered around and listened to him preach about the white man's evil ways. Eventually, I went with one of my homeboys, a guy called Madi, to check him out. Jim's message reminded me of what I had heard from Chicago, the black revolutionary I met in Norfolk jail, and much of it was similar to the teachings of Malcolm X and the Muslims. Don't you know the white men are the most lying creatures on the face of the earth? They don't care nothing about the truth. They use falsehood to gain dominance over people, and they use trickery to maintain that dominance. They run game on black folks by trying to get them to think bad things about themselves that aren't true and believe good things about white people that are outright lies. Think about it. White folks claim we're lazy and don't want to work. Our people work for whites for 200 years for free, man, because white folks were too lazy to work for themselves. Our women cook, clean their houses, and raise their children because whites were too trifling to do their own work. Yet, they're going to call us lazy. If you look around today, black folks still do the most work that the whites don't want to do. Check this out. White folks claim we constantly have illegitimate babies and demanding them. During slavery, they raped black women and fathered more illegitimate children than we can count. Why you think there's so many coffee brown and light skinned black folks like me and you? That's because we come from those children that white men fathered and abandoned, man. And they try to pretend that it's us that got a thing for white women. White men live for the day to get a piece of black meat. Think about it, brother. I don't care what we produce or invent. White folks don't want to acknowledge its worth unless they can steal it and take credit for it themselves. Look at all the things black folks invented and had stolen from them. Look at how whites worship Elvis Presley. Black folks been singing soul music for years and whites wouldn't give them their due. Then come along Elvis, imitating black soul, and they treat him like he's a god. Everything Jim said seemed to have the ring of truth. After he'd finished, I chatted with him and we hit it off real well. He learned that I was a Christian. He challenged me to rethink my commitment to the white man's religion. He said white folks love for blacks to embrace Christianity because they use it to control us. He said whites encourage us to follow Martin Luther King Jr. because he was a passive Christian, and they urge us to reject Malcolm X because he challenged us to stand up against white oppression. Oh shit, hold on. Forgive me, family. I'm doing too much. I'm trying to make sure I'm not on the show at the same time. So it's all that multitasking, doing the most. If Christianity is such an effective religion, then why hasn't it helped white people become more humane? Most white people in this country are Christians, and they still are the most hateful, ruthless group of people on the face of this earth. Open your eyes, man. Black Christians are no better. They believe that they ain't righteous unless they suffer like Jesus suffered. Christianity got black people thinking we got to be crucified in this life in order to get peace in the next one. I want what's coming to me in this life, here and now, man. White Christians are also imperialists. Check anywhere in the world where you find that there are white people, there's Christianity, and there are missionaries. They send the Christian missionaries in first to preach, turn the other cheek. Then they come in with their armies and conquer the people. I began to see what he was talking about. Books I found in the library told me that whites in South Africa, Britain, France, Portugal, and Spain, not to mention America, had oppressed people of color whenever they encountered them. Practically every place I could identify that there were whites, people of color were suffering at their hands. Jim was right about something else, too. The prison administrator was very supportive of our Christian fellowship group. They knew Christian inmates were the most easily controlled. They made sure that they provided us a space for our activities, often suspending rules to accommodate us. At the same time, the Muslims who were considered more radical complained that the administrator was less supportive of them. The control issue sealed my split with Christianity. I wanted no part of anything being used by white people to control blacks. In his talks, Jim also focused a lot on history. He said it was important to understand the past because it shapes our present perceptions about ourselves and the rest of the world. He said that white people think they're better than everybody because they are taught a history of distorted facts that always presents whites in a positive, superior light. Think about it, man. They teach you that white settlers who came over here were heroes, and we celebrate Thanksgiving to commemorate their heroism. But check this out. When the settlers were starving, the Indians helped feed them. The Indians helped them survive through winter. The settlers repaid them by killing them off and taking their land. Now you tell me, were the white settlers heroes or barbarians? I thought about all the lies and indoctrination I had absorbed all through school. Every year, teachers drilled into our heads myth about the heroic white pioneers who sailed from England and settled Jamestown, Virginia. Relics of that settlement have been preserved through the years to support the myths. I remember my 4th and 5th grade classes took a field trip to Jamestown settlement, which is about 40-minute drive from Portsmouth, and visited replicas of tiny ships the whites rode here. When I was young, I accepted my teacher's version of the stories about Jamestown and everything else I was taught because there was no real reason to question it. I figured that if it was contained in school books, then it must be true. Throughout school, except during Black History Week, we were taught more about everybody else than about ourselves. I'll never forget that one of my junior high school history teachers made us memorize all the dynasties of the Chinese Empire from start to finish in chronological order. Yet, the story of the Africans brought here as slaves was summed up in our history book in a few short paragraphs. Funny, besides going back to that too. Also, almost as a footnote, on some level, that communicated the message that we were less than important than everyone else. It does. I wonder how my black teachers could permit such a thing. I do. I understood now that they taught what was approved for the school system and that white schools have been integrated for blacks and whites administration. The administrators have still failed to integrate the information they passed along. They did. In my reading, I also learned that we've been grossly misled in the school about the Indians. Our textbooks always portray Native Americans as primitive heathens who threatened to obstruct the settlers' noble mission. That version of history was promoted on TV westerns that show brave cowboys battling savage Indians who attacked them for no apparent reason. When I was young, I thought those Indians were crazy with their feathered headdress and painted faces, riding horses and yelling like they lost their minds. When I learned that those Indians were actually fighting to protect what was rightfully theirs, that they were the true heroes and that the settlers were the savages, like Jim said, it made me furious to know that whites so arrogantly distorted the truth. I reflected on those and other myths that may have influenced my thinking as a child and I realized Malcolm X, Chicago, Jim, and so many other cats were right. Black people have been systematically brainwashed, and our parents had paid their tax dollars for the schools, biased textbooks, and curriculums that help carry that out. Without realizing it, we've been taught to hate ourselves and love white people, and it was causing us to self destruct. Jim and I started exchanging books and talking regularly about the effects of historical myths on blacks. We met on the yard most evenings after chow and talked with other guys who also did a lot of reading. In that group, I met some of the sharpest, most intelligent guys I've ever known then or since. Most of them were dropouts who had long before lost interest in formal schooling. But once they got a whiff of some real knowledge, knowledge that was relevant to them, they educated themselves far better than any public school could have hoped for. We formed our own writers guild, discussed world affairs and politics, and talked about what we intended to do when we got out. Those were the deepest discussions I've ever had. We debated theories of the major philosophers, Spinoza, Kant, Hegel, satire, and many others. We dissected dualism, pantheism, existentialism, and discussed questions such as how can we appreciate good until you've known evil? Does essence precede does essence precede existence, or does existence precede essence? Sometimes during those conversations, I was struck by the strangeness of former robbers, drug dealers, and murderers standing in the middle of a prison yard debating the heaviest philosophical questions of all time. Jim, who had worked constantly to improve his vocabulary, taught me to play the word game Scrabble. He memorized many of the 2 and 3 and 4 letter words in the dictionary to help him score high. Me, I just call myself the king of 2 and 3 letter words. We were often joined in fierce matches by Lee Hargrave, the serial murderer who worked with me in the library. I know that's right. One day after Hargrave had won the game and left the room, Jim said, "Hey man, we can't let this white boy beat us in Scrabble on the Scrabble board." Initially, I didn't get it. What's the problem? Then you know this cracker think he's smarter than us because he's white and we're black. Can't you tell that? He's always trying to bluff us with medical words he think we don't know. I knew what Jim meant. I got that same feeling when I played whites at chess. I got the feeling that white boys automatically assume that they can beat me on the board because chess was a thinking person's game. And I was black and they were white, and therefore they were better thinkers. They never came out and said it, but I could tell by their confidence, body language, and their smug analysis of moves made during the games that they assumed that they were superior. That's why whenever I played whites at chess, the fun went completely out the game. It was war disguised as a game. Every nerve in my body stood on end and my mind focused sharply on every piece on that board. I was like a boxer, eyeing an opponent, every feint, every move, ready to use sharply honed reflexes to make him pay dearly for the slightest mistake. I suspected Hargrove thought he was smarter than everybody at Southampton. He had an elitist air about him. Even after being at Southampton more than a year, he rarely spoke to more than a few select people and still refused to eat in the cafeteria. While everybody else read Ebony, Jet, Time, Newsweek, and other mass circulated periodicals in the library, Hargrove subscribed to his own Town and Country magazine. Curious, I borrowed an issue from him and leafed through it. It carried stories about pictures about rich white people who spent their time horseback riding, fox hunting, and managing their stables and shit. Whenever Hargrove's parent came to visit him, his father wore a business suit and a tie, and his mother wore a dress. Out of place in the visiting room with all those working class black people, they looked stiff and formal, like Beaver Cleaver's parents on TV. Every time I went to the visiting room, his parents made a point to come over to my table and say artificially hello to my family and me. I sensed they were unaccustomed to interacting with black people, yet they were trying to encourage me to cultivate a relationship with their son. They were they were well aware that he was in constant danger because of his crimes against elderly people, and I suspected they viewed me as somebody who could help protect them if the need arose. But I wasn't about to let them use me. I knew that if those rich white people passed me on the streets, they would probably roll up their car windows and lock their doors. After Jim pulled my coat to Hargrove, we came up with a way to cheat him like white folks cheat us. Jim, who was a great defensive Scrabble player, made sure he sat in front of Hargrove to prevent him from getting opening to score high points. Whenever Hargrove took the lead, Jim and I secretly fed each other key letters to make sure one of us won the game. Hargrove never won another game after that. I don't know if he caught on, but it didn't matter. No one else in our building played Scrabble. He loved the game, so he had to play with us or not play at all. In a way, Jim was also similar to Mo Battle, my mentor in Norfolk jail. When he saw young guys with potentials come in the receiving unit, he'd take time to school them on about anything he could. He'd pull them to the side and tell them that the do's and don'ts of prison life so the wolves couldn't get to them. The wolves resented Jim because of that, but none made a move to do anything about it. It amazed me to see how much the so called tough cats respected Jim. Whenever he was around, they cursed less and toned down their macho posturing, as if he was an authority figure or a revered elder. Initially, that kind of difference, which bordered on fear, puzzled me because Jim didn't carry himself like a knockout artist or anything. Brown skinned and medium built, he always dressed neat and spoke softly. He was clean shaven and constantly carried books and newspapers tucked under his arm. Eventually, I figured out that the characteristics that made him so widely accepted had little to do with how he looked. Instead, his manly demeanor. Ever since I could recall, I and everybody else I knew had associated manhood with physical dominance and conquest of someone. Watching Jim, I'd realized we'd gone about it all wrong. Jim didn't have to make a rep for himself as a thumper. He could whoop a man with a sharp mind and choice words far more thoroughly than he could with his fist. The wolves feared this kind of ass whooping much more than that, than a physical beating, so they kept their distance. I decided that this was the kind of respect I wanted to command. I noticed the other guys who, without being fully aware, wanted to be like Jim too. They strutted on the yard looking super macho, like killers, but acted differently in private. In those moments, when they weren't profiling with their buddies, some of my tough acting homies would stop by my perch on the yard or in my cell and ask, "What you read?" I sensed they wanted to improve themselves but didn't want their other homies to see them because self improvement wasn't a macho thing. Pearly Blue was one of them. He sometimes tried to draw me into deep private conversations about God and reality while sticking to the tough street vernacular that helped him maintain his macho facade. As I learned more about our misguided ideas about manhood, I experimented with some of those macho dudes. Whenever I passed them, I looked into their eyes to see what was there. A few had cold blooded, killer look about them, but in the eyes of most of them, I saw something I hadn't noticed before: fear. Even in Big Earl. Big Earl was one of the brawniest, most outwardly fearless cats in the place. He was tall, jet black, his muscles rippled through his t shirt, and his thighs were so massive that all his pants fit too tight. Big Earl, who was 30 ish, was from a small off brand town in rural Virginia, but he didn't need homies to back him up. He walked around the yard talking loud and intimidating inmates like he owned the place. One day, while walking down the long sidewalk on my way to the cafeteria, I spotted Big Earl pimping towards me. He never said anything to me, Jim, or some of the others who were part of our progressive group. As he approached, I fixed my eyes on his and kept them locked there. When we got closer, I kept my eyes fastened to his, not in a hostile gaze, but in an expressive of serene self-assurance. Initially, he tried to meet my gaze. Then he turned his eyes away and looked toward the ground. I smiled to myself. I would have never been able to back down Big Earl in a rumble, but I certainly backed him down with my mind. Several times after that brief silent encounter, I caught Big Earl watching me curiously. He never said anything. He just watched and turned away whenever he realized I caught him staring. I sensed he knew I'd figured out that he wasn't as confident of his manhood as he pretended to be, and he felt naked and exposed. I practiced the piercing eye contact thing with other guys like Earl and realized that few of them seriously bad cats could meet my gaze. That helped me see my homies and other toughs at Southampton as they were, and as I had been, streetwise, pseudo badasses who were really frightened boys, bluffing, trying to mask their fear of the world behind muscular frames. All right, I finished that too. Jim made parole in 1977. The word spread fast across the yard that he would soon be leaving. This dude, who had been locked up since 1962, longer than anybody else there, was getting out, and it was regarded as a momentous occasion at Southampton. The day Jim left, hordes of guys lined up along the sidewalks to watch him walk out. The guys in our group, including me, were saddened. It was always that way when good friends left. You were glad they were getting out, yet sorrowful because they had helped you do your time. Before leaving, Jim chatted with us a few more minutes and dropped a few more morsels of advice on us. Then said, "Later, man, I'll keep in touch." That was the only time I ever saw a hint of apprehension in his face. With his arms loaded down with a box full of books and other possessions, he walked slowly to the administration building. He waved one last time, then turned his head, held high, and disappeared through the door. All right, family, we'll start on chapter 23. What time is it? 8:03? Let me see. No, I'll read this first part. We're on chapter 23, Freedom. In the late spring of 1977, I was approved for a 2-day furlough. Under prison guidelines, I can go on furlough if approved once I near my parole eligibility date. I knocked down more than 2 years in the joint and had less than one to go. When my furlough date arrived that June, I went to the administration building to sign my release papers. Looking through that glass and steel cage, I could see my stepfather sitting on the bench in the hallway waiting for me. When I walked through the cage, he stood, extended his hand, and smiled. We both stood there, vigorously shaking hands and grinning broadly. "How you doing?" "Fine." My lips quivered. "I can't believe this." As we headed for the car, I thought of the many nights I laid in my bunk trying to imagine how it would feel to walk through that door. It felt just like I thought it would. Wonderful. On the ride home, we talked about general things: how close I was to parole eligibility, how healthy I looked. My stepfather showed me his new CB radio. There were still uneasy silences between us, but the broad gulf that had separated us didn't seem as wide as it used to be. I realized during my time in prison that a lot of the lessons he tried to teach my brothers and me, specifically lessons about the dignity of work, were on the money. Sitting there, I wanted to let him know that I was beginning to see life differently and tell him I better understood where he was coming from, but I didn't say it. I still hadn't reached the point where I could express my deepest emotions to him. We rode, and I looked anxiously out the window at all the forgotten sights flying past and took in the warm feel of the bright summer day. 2 hours later, we pulled into Cavalier Manor. I nearly broke down and cried when I saw my old neighborhood. As we drove along, I scanned all the houses of people I knew and wondered what courses their life have taken. We turned onto Darren Drive and wound around the curve leading toward our street. When we got there and drove up to the house, my mother was standing in the doorway waiting. I went into the house, hugged her, then walked quickly through every room to refresh my memory. I went out in the backyard and checked out the once bald spots where my brothers and I had played sandlot basketball and baseball as young boys. I never knew home meant so much. That afternoon, I walked to a friend's house, stopped by 7-Eleven, and ran into some of the fellas, including Lep, Hope, and the dude I did my first band B&E with, and Shane, who had heard I was coming home. We talked a short while, then I left. I didn't want to spend much time with him. The entire time I was down, they hadn't written or visited me, and I was pissed. I remembered that when Holt had done his time, his prison bid years before, I made a point to keep in touch with him. Later that day, Nutbrain came by. He and Charlie Gregg had recently been paroled. Seeing my man Nutbrag was like seeing an old war buddy. We posed for pictures in front of my stepfather's new Eldorado and caught up on each other's lives. Nutbrain said he was looking for work and trying to readjust. I'm just trying to get my act together. Things out here have changed a lot, man. It's strange. Then Liz came by with Monroe, who was then 4 years old. I was glad Monroe was still too young to understand that I was doing time. I played with him in the backyard, but still found it hard to connect with him being my son. What was different was that I felt greater sense of responsibility for him than before. I nearly came apart when I first saw Liz. She looked as beautiful as ever. We embraced, then stood back and looked at each other long and hard. Her eyes were sad and she seemed tentative, like she felt guilty about having left me and was unsure how she should act. She said in one of her last letters that she thought we should give our thing another try. I wanted to ask questions. What did that letter mean? Was she still dating? Did she have a man? But none of that mattered in the moment. All that mattered was she was there and open to the possibility that we can try again. The three of us, Liz, Monroe, and I spent most of that day at my folks' house talking and eating. The following night, my mother babysat and Liz and I went to a hotel. She had gotten reservations at one of the best hotels in the area, the Omni in downtown Norfolk, so that we could celebrate our reunion in style. I had hoped that after a night of passionate love making, we both concluded that we couldn't do without each other. I'd fantasized that we bring back the fire that we once had and that everything would come together in a nice, tidy ending like the movies. But it didn't work out that way. It felt so strange being out of prison that I couldn't unwind. She was uptight too. That night we talked, we argued, we cried, we mourned the passing of our relationship. We realized, even in bed, that our old chemistry wasn't there. We both changed and grown, it seemed, in different directions. The next morning, Liz drove me home, and we said another tearful goodbye. Sunday came around in no time. It felt weird riding back to prison voluntarily. On the way back, my stepfather let me brood in peace. I think he knew how hard it was for me to return, and he realized that was no use in trying to lighten my mood with chit chat. I got back to Southampton and my homies crowded around to get the latest scoop from the streets. How was it, man? Did you get over? Who did you see on the block? I finished talking with them, went to my cell, and went to bed early to brood some more. The furlough had come and gone fast as I had dreamed it. All right, family. It's been a good night. Um, it's Thursday, so I hope you have a fantastic week. Hope we get to see you here next Tuesday when we do Soul Sound Me Live. And I don't know what we're gonna be talking about this time. We're still on emotional intelligence, but we were working on forgiveness and Tues for forgiveness, so something around that. And if you can't make it Tuesday, I hope to see you here back Thursday with Book Club, where we will continue reading Makes Me Wanna Holler by Nathan McCall. So I wish you many blessings and have a great weekend, family. Peace.